Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here with STN. We're excited you made it to the podcast, brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. Our guest today is Doug Francis, recently retired Associate Transportation Director and Head Mechanic for Gaylord Community Schools in Michigan, and a Regional Director for the Michigan Association of Pupil Transportation. And always my illustrious co-host, Mr. Ryan Gray. Welcome, Mr. Gray.
Hello, Mr. Corpin. Hello, nation.
That's right. We're ready for another fun-filled episode, Ryan. And I know there's lots happening. We've got Inflation Reduction Act, which feels a little more like a infusion of green energy for the school transportation industry. So let's kind of break down what that really means for our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So the overall Inflation Reduction Act, it basically encompasses a lot of the Democrat priorities up in Washington, D.C. That they've been pushing for a long time, expanding Medicare benefits, lowering energy bills. Of course, as you mentioned it, this historic climate investment, where they're seeking to reduce carbon emissions by roughly 40% by 2030. As we know, as we saw, Tony, out at ACT Expo back in May, the U.S. is really behind about 20 other countries in terms of carbon emissions. A lot of countries, you look at like Sweden, Finland, a lot of the Norwegian countries have already hit that 30 and 40% reduction. And, the U.S. is like more at 10 to 20%. So they're really looking to throw money at green energy. And it's kind of interesting, you're looking at inflation reduction, yet more money going out into the economy. So it will be really interesting to see how that really goes forward. Of course, a very partisan bill. I was looking at some analysis on it, and the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania said there's really no meaningful effect in the near term, and it would reduce inflation by about 0.1% in the first 5 years. So kind of some short-term Band-Aid, if you will. You mentioned it, though, for what this industry is looking at. There's a lot of folks that are applauding it, especially the manufacturers of the buses. Everybody and their brother now is making an electric school bus, as we saw out in Reno in July. Now, what this does, in addition to addressing a lot of the things I mentioned earlier, is it brings back the alternative tax credits that expired at the end of 2021. So back, extending through 2024, we're going to see a 50 cent per gallon gasoline equivalent credit for CNG and propane. And additionally, there's more funding, or at least incentives out there to purchase electric vehicles. So we're seeing a $4,000 tax credit for the purchase of used electric vehicles. So a lot of the finer details still need to come out, and we're going to have an article on stnonline.com. So go over to the website and visit that to read more. But this is one of the first times I've really seen talking about used electric vehicles. And of course, here in the school bus industry, we have repowers, right? Where we're taking used diesel buses, and now Bluebird announced recently used or legacy fleet gasoline and propane, and converting those to electric battery power. So that it will be interesting to see how that plays into this. Also, there's a $7,500 tax credit for the purchase of new EVs. And again, I believe these are more on the passenger level, because along with this Inflation Reduction Act is another $1 billion for electric HD vehicles, heavy duty vehicles. So there's a lot there to wrap your head around. I mean, we're talking about, raising taxes mostly on the wealthy, but not all. The feds are looking to raise about $737 billion to pay for this, and investing half of that money, or a little over half of that money, $437 billion, into this energy security and climate change, and then Affordable Care Act extension and Western drought resiliency. So obviously, out here, the Western states, we have a huge drought that, burdens us every day. So the House and Senate Democrats are saying that overall, though, this is still expected to reduce the total deficit by over $300 billion. And these are all, estimates at this point.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I know as the school bus industry is probably looking at, if you have propane buses, you've counted on that 50 cent per gallon rebate that, for most district comes in the form of a check at the end of the day. I know we had a Dr. Kane Smith from Cypress Fairbanks at STN Expo on the Propane Education Research Council panel discussion.
Yeah.
And, he had talked in depth about kind of the amount of money that the district gets back that they can put back in the classroom. And it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. But what's interesting, which is Steelen Whaley, who's the business development director for propane auto gas for PERC, is that he said it was interesting because they're incentivizing people to invest in propane, but it kind of is received kind of almost in the rears, right? Because they were kind of doing an annual affirmation that they could get this credit. But now with a 3-year basically approval, now it's guaranteed you're going to get that 50 cent per gallon through 2024. So people can factor that into their decision making, especially when they're applying for some of these Clean School Bus Act monies, that now on top of that, they're going to get a fuel rebate, which is very significant in my opinion. So very interesting from a financial planning standpoint for the school transportation people that may be thinking about going propane. This only kind of incentivizes them even more. And I think, again, Ryan, the point of this bill is that there's some real and financial incentives that are going to help school districts kind of stay on that alternative energy pathway. And it's very exciting to see legislation that's going to help the school transportation industry. Once again, we'll continue to take advantage of that as it's available. So exciting times, Ryan. Good stuff. All right. What else? What are the news related items kind of hit the wire?
Well, we have an article up on stnonline.com. Some of you might remember way back in late June, the Supreme Court kind of buried along some other more high-profile decisions that certainly got the nation's attention. There was a ruling that basically struck down the never implemented Clean Power Plan by the EPA to regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act. So we're talking about coal-fired power plants, basically. And there has been a big effort among the Democrats, again, in the EPA Democrat administration to curtail those and move towards a more renewable source, such as like nuclear, solar, wind. SCOTUS struck that down. It was a decision, West Virginia v. EPA, basically West Virginia, one of the largest coal mining states in the country. And so there was a lot of conversation, and I know, Tony, you and I had a little bit of it when it first came down. What would this mean to the school bus industry, and especially as we were waiting, or it had just opened up the application period for the Clean School Bus Program rebate for the first $500 million of the first $1 billion that's going to be available this year. So we dove into that a little bit, and we talked to several experts, some legal experts as well, and essentially, it's not going to affect. That's kind of the feedback that we got from various folks, because the Clean School Bus Program, that $5 billion 5-year program passed last year with the bipartisan infrastructure law, that's in the books. That's a law. Really what the Supreme Court's doing is trying to limit EPA's regulatory oversight going forward and telling them what they can and they can't do. So certainly, this is still remains a very important issue, because I think that so much what we talk about, Tony, is the bridge fuels. Or how do we get from where we are now to where everyone thinks we need to eventually be, to try to reverse global warming, try to make the environment cleaner, especially around schools for students with the growing, developing lungs that they get hit so hard by pollutants out there. Certainly going forward, we need more renewable energy. And I think that what the Supreme Court ruling basically said was that, hey, states are already implementing their own programs and have been implementing their programs. It's an overreach for the federal government to dictate to all the states what they need to do. Certainly, I believe it's about 20 or maybe even 24 states that have programs in place right now or are coming online very soon to move to more renewable energy. So that's a good thing, in terms of the feedback we heard that it's not going to affect this Clean School Bus program. We know going forward, and here we are. We just have passed now the application deadline for that, at least the first part of year one funds. We're now awaiting to find out how is the EPA going to spend that additional $500 million this year. We've heard some rumors out there. We should find out very soon. But definitely, I think it's another shot in the arm for the school districts out there that are looking to go green or continue going green, that some obstacles maybe are being removed from their pathway.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to see, Ryan. I think we're kind of in that gray area now where, the funding application is like you said, it's closed for now. And then we'll see what the next tranche of money looks like, how much, who applied, how many vehicles are going to go to which direction, right? Because out of that monies, $250 million goes to electric exclusively, and the other $250 million is kind of up for grabs with propane, CNG, and electric also. So, is electric going to capture the lion's share of that $500 million in this first tranche? Or what's the numbers going to break down to be?
Are they going to shift it? Or, I've heard that it could be, since we had this first program was a rebate. And there was some differing opinions on how fruitful that would be to everyone. There's been some talk about making it more of a competitive grant in the fall. So again, we should be finding out very soon. EPA is literally just closed the books on the applications. So they are heading out on their way toward making awards. And we know that the priority list goes to rural, tribal, and the most disadvantaged economic areas. So again, in the fall, maybe do we see additional funding open up for these other areas? And there's a lot of districts out there that I've talked to that did not apply under those two rules for the priority listing, yet they're saying, wait a second, but we're still 70% free and reduced lunch in our district. So it's very finite language in there. So, maybe that gives some entry to some of these other districts a little bit later on.
It's interesting you bring that up too, because I was talking to some OEM partners, a few different OEM partners, and they said they've gotten flooded last week with people wanting to fill out the form. So nothing like a last second fire drill to fill out the forms. Everybody procrastinated to the last moment.
Especially at school startup too, when they've had, and granted the application window wasn't open for that long, but still about 2-3 months, I think. And it just goes to show, it kind of opened up right when school was ending. I think people were exhausted. We obviously continue to have this huge driver shortage affect us nationwide. So I sense that people were a bit relieved when the school year, more so than normal, that the school year was over. And I think they kind of now are looking up and going, oh, crud, like we need to apply.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. Well, summer is basically kind of almost in the rearview mirror, and school startup is upon us. And, it's been a big undertaking trying to get transportation operations up and running again. And guys, you might want to check out TransFinder to help you get there. They have their trifecta solution. That's Route Finder Plus, the browser-based solution, Wayfinder, their innovative driver app, and Stop Finder, the industry-leading parent app. And their product Plus is now more than 2 years old and has proprietary artificial intelligence optimization baked into it with tools like Form Finder, Chat Finder. So if you guys are looking to kind of streamline your routing process, maybe going 3-tier, 4-tier, they'd love to talk to you. Give them a call. It's 800-373-3609. Or you can also email TransFinder at getplus@transfinder.com to learn all about the award-winning trifecta solution. All right, Ryan, excited for your interview? Take it away.
Want to welcome our next guest, Doug Francis, the recently retired Associate Director of Transportation and the head mechanic for Gaylord Community Schools there in Northern Michigan. Doug, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, my pleasure, my pleasure.
So as I mentioned, Doug, you recently retired. I think you were telling me that you just are shy of 40 years. You'll be in the industry 40 years in October. So you retired just shy of that. You were at Gaylord since, was it 1983?
Yes, 1983, February of 1983.
So how did you get involved with school buses? Because I'm looking at you here for the sake of all of our listeners at home. Doug, you look like you're about 45. So, I mean, you must have started when you were, in first grade.
Well, I'm going to be 59 next month. But I was 19 when I started there.
Okay.
Somebody knew the superintendent that knew my auto shop teacher that I had at the school. I went to the auto shop program to our school. I came highly recommended, and they kind of came after me. And when I went in there were two people that were in their late 50s, and within 3 years they retired, and I was in charge of a fleet of like 46 buses by the time I was 21.
Wow. So that's a great segue because one of the reasons I wanted to get you on this podcast was to talk about that mechanic shortage, that technician shortage that is affecting everybody nationwide. You've said that in Michigan, it's especially bad, right? And I want to get into that. But first of all, touching base on what I hear not enough school districts are doing or are able to do is apprenticeship programs. And it sounds like that's what you were able to do back in the days when we were actually had shop class, yes. Right, in our schools?
Yes. Well, actually, Michigan is looking at that again right now about getting some of the young students involved in transportation when they're still in school, kind of like a pair program or another type of program. But somehow we have to get young people involved and interested in the mechanics field. And then, of course, when you get them in there, get them trained good, you got to, of course, pay them to keep them there,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So when you left Gaylord, what kind of shortage were you dealing with?
Well, when I was there, we were fine. There were two of us in the garage, but after I retired, they only had one applicant for my position. And apparently that person didn't fit the needs of our district. So they're going to have one tech now, and they're going to ship out major work that they can't handle in our facility now. And we actually have a school bus IC dealership in our district. But they have a shortage. They have all their guys working all the overtime they want because they can't find techs. So we really have a problem in Michigan trying, with techs.
Mm-hmm. And you're still on the Michigan Association for Pupil Transportation Board of Directors. You're a region director for them. So you've retained that here even in retirement. What is the shortage looking like mechanics statewide? What are you hearing from districts in your region and districts across the state?
I know a lot of people across the state of Michigan. I talk to a lot of salesmen that know a lot of people in Michigan that attend a lot or, come across a lot of schools in Michigan. And they all tell me the same story. They can't find techs. Big companies are shifting techs from one district to another to take care of buses, but they're just a big shortage on mechanics, period. And I'm talking about the school bus industry, but it sounds like across Michigan, even in the heavy equipment part of it.
So, we've had a lot of articles in the magazine and our website around this topic. And Bob Podluski, who is our tech editor, some of you might know the name or read his articles in the magazine, has been in the industry about as longer than you have, Doug. And he came from the contractor side. And of course, so he writes about so much maintenance and technology. And he's been sounding this alarm for a while, looking at what's, because this is not new. This is not something that just has fallen in our laps. This has been ongoing, and this has, been building over the last couple of years. And he's talked about how, to your point of trying to attract the new mechanics, that, working on school buses, trucks, heavy duty, medium duty trucks, it's not a quote unquote dirty job anymore. So many folks might have looked at that in years past and said, I'm not interested in turning a wrench and getting oil all over me. But with today's new buses, that's, not as much the case anymore, correct?
Correct. The technology is really taking over the mechanical part of it. The technology part has removed a lot of the dirty work, I should say, improved things. But of course, it's added. Now you have another field that you have to adapt and learn. And truthfully, I'm going to be 59, and you got to keep up with things. But it seems that the younger people, they're fresh and they're more open-minded, and they kind of grasp things better than maybe people of my generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you almost have to have like an IT degree if you have that coming out and looking at vehicle maintenance. Where before those two would never have jibed, right?
Absolutely.
But now. So what was your fleet again when you left? What was the size?
We're down to 30 buses. We had 46 at one time. We're down to 30 now.
Okay. So when you were working on buses and you had your associate, that's a pretty good ratio, 1 to 15 buses or so.
Yes.
Certainly the school district has been forced to now stretch it 1 to 30. That's getting a little high, but still not as bad as what I'm hearing from some other districts. I'm hearing like 1 to 40. 1 to 45. So as you're looking at potential new technicians, new applicants, what was Gaylord doing or trying to do when you left? And what are you hearing from other districts in the state, what they're trying to do to bridge this gap and attract those maybe kids right out of a high school or kids that are maybe going to vocational school to try to attract them over to the school district?
Well, I've attended a couple meetings statewide about this. And if you're a district big enough to have an auto shop program in your district, we were trying to get, transportation departments and auto shop teachers and the auto shop program across the state kind of tied together to, transition young people over. And it doesn't matter if it's male or female anymore because it's some days it's not a dirty, dirty job. But trying to get them to bridge the gap so we could bring young people in and, educate them. So, and show them it's a good job. It's a very interesting field. School buses are their own animal. And you run across some interesting things working on a school bus that you wouldn't see in the other industries. But I think the need is there, stretching somebody's mind when you get the job, because sometimes you really got to dig into yourself to figure issues out. And having connections and building relationships with dealerships and so forth, I think that's what it's going to take to get people back into the field.
Mm-hmm. And you're a testament to this. You can make a good living. I mean, you get into a government position, and you might not be making the salary that you are at a private company or a private trucking company or garage or whatnot, but you have that pension, right?
Things are changing there too. Things have changed with Michigan. Okay.
Right. The people that are starting today are not going to be getting what you got, but
right. But even the private companies, I've heard stories about the private companies, and they're really stepping up the plate. We have Dean's Transportation in Michigan. They have like 1,200 buses, and I hear some really good stories about what they're paying people. So everybody's trying to increase their wages to attract people. I'm not sure if that's all it's going to take. I'm not sure what's holding people back, but it really is a good field to get into, and it's steady. Typically, you have a pretty decent facility to work in. So why not go that way, especially for a young person today?
Absolutely. And you mentioned Dean Transportation, our NSTA Contractor Company of the Year that was just awarded last month. So congratulations again to them. So yeah, definitely they're, when it comes to special needs there in the state, they're doing so much. But, it also too, in terms of what we're talking about with the mechanic shortage, let's transition to the topic of electric buses and how that factors in. So now Gaylord was the first district, I understand, in the state, going back to what I believe it was in 2019 that brought in electric buses?
Yes.
Okay.
That had been 2.5 years ago. Just over 2.5 years ago, we were the first district in Michigan to receive our electric buses. We were part of the Volkswagen mitigation pilot program through the Michigan Association for Pupil Transportation.
Yeah, one of 7 districts, I believe,
yes,
that brought in buses, these electric buses. So in terms of the mechanic shortage and working on those vehicles, we have an article out right now in our August magazine that talks about this and, the training that's necessary. And so much of what we're hearing is the OEMs are saying, hey, time out. They don't want school districts to just, start working on them. Hey, here you go. Here's your electric bus. We've always seen this, right, with any warranty period, especially when it's a new technology. The school districts and bus companies really heavily lean on their OEM partners and their dealers to work out those kinks. That's especially important right now, and especially when you're looking at fewer bodies in the shop.
Yes. So fortunately, we were kind of prepped for this because, our vehicles have gone, we have a body module, we have a transmission ECM, we have an engine ECM, and lots of wiring. And so we've kind of been set up for that direction, Well, at least I was, because I've been in the field so long. So they still have wires, they still have connectors. The difference is they have batteries and electric motor versus an engine, transmission, and the DEF system to take care of.
Yeah. And something I've heard some anxiety about or concern about from mechanics out there is like, well, we're reading all these articles and you no longer have the oil changes and changing the oil filters and the fuel filters. You don't have the transmission work. What are we needed for going forward? And you're speaking to that right now where there is so much, it's still a bus. And getting back into what we were talking about before with computers.
Yes,
you need to have that kind of work going forward. So it's flipping that mentality, that mindset.
Yeah, Michigan, we're blessed with snow, and we're blessed with lots of snow melting products, whether it be salt or whatever they put on the road. And that's highly corrosive, and that causes lots of issues in Michigan. Vehicles, school buses, trucks, whatever. So there's still going to be that kind of work. And then there is still maintenance to the vehicle. If your school bus has a diesel-powered heater, there's still annual maintenance to that. There's going to be probably the typical electronic issues, maybe with a crossing guard or a stop arm or something. There's still going to be that kind of work. You're just not going to have regular oil changes to take care of, transmission issues to deal with, and of course the DEF systems to deal with, or exhaust systems, or propane issues or gas engine issues. Those are all gone. Now you just have a gas pedal, batteries, and electric motor, basically.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to piggyback on the comment about the fuel-fired heaters. Someone, actually, our Innovation Award winner last month, Alex Cook at First Student, obviously First Student, like everybody else, they're in an electrification process. They're working with like dozens of customers and utilities across the nation. They have the largest fleet, obviously, so they're really going full bore into this. And he was talking at our STN Expo Indianapolis about the need right now for fuel-fired heaters. While on one hand, you're talking about zero emissions. Well, you have that. It's not truly zero emissions, but he's talking about, hey, to keep these buses operating on the road, they're finding that you have to have them, at least for, so far. What has your experience been? Obviously, you're using those. What are your thoughts on where the industry and where electric buses need to go so that they truly are zero emissions, at least from the tailpipe? Not even talking about, the mining and everything, but what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so our two Lion buses do have diesel-powered heaters on them. And last year, our coldest day was 22 below zero. And the buses were plenty warm. I mean, you actually have to turn the heaters off. That's how warm they are. They really, really perform well for keeping the bus warm in our temperatures. We averaged 5 quarts of diesel fuel per day to heat our buses. 5 quarts. Now, I think I already mentioned once, there are a lot of districts in Michigan that, their buses are parked outside, they're diesel engines, and they have a diesel-powered heater. So they're burning fuel to move the vehicle, they're burning fuel actually to heat the vehicle too. It's my opinion right now that we need some sort of a diesel-fired heater. And I don't know if there's a propane heater out there like that. I'm not sure. But for 5 quarts a day, we're not talking much for emissions. We averaged 6.85 miles per gallon last year. Our heaters take nothing compared to what the bus takes to operate the vehicle. Okay. And I spoke to people out when I was out in Reno this year, people with fully electric heated buses, and they had some issues. Mm-hmm. They started out warm, but opening and closing a door constantly, they had some keeping the bus warm issues. So I think for now, we need something like that until they come up with maybe a better battery technology or a stronger battery for that application.
Yeah, I know that some of the HVAC suppliers have been working on this, but again, I just don't, like you're saying, it's not quite there ready for prime time. Where its applicability can, go nationwide, where depending on if you're in the Northeast or the North or the Midwest, down South, where it works. So surely we are in the frontier days, I like to call them, of electric vehicles, where everyone's trying to figure all this stuff out. And to your point where I was mentioning what Alex Cook told us, regarding the need for fuel-fired heaters, and you're saying you see the same thing, because when you're not using those, that affects range. And his point was, we can't have these buses run out of charge halfway through the route and it's stranded on the side of the road, especially if it's negative 22 out, right?
Yes. Yeah. Using a diesel-powered heater doesn't affect the range of the vehicle. Okay, that's totally different. Now, some of them have a split system where you have one set of batteries that drive the vehicle, one set of batteries that keep the vehicle warm and operate the vehicle. I think those are the vehicles that have problems with range. But people got to remember, these vehicles just don't shut off. I brought a vehicle in one time with 123.5 miles on it, and the range expectancy was 125 miles. They go into what they call derate. They just slow down. So when I came back in our facility with 125.5 miles, I was doing 25 miles an hour. So more than likely, the vehicle won't leave you stranded. You can probably drive 20 miles at 20 miles an hour to get you where you have to go.
Okay. Any other concerns in terms of maintenance where you feel that the industry is really leaning and continues to need to lead on the OEMs? Obviously, there's the thermal events. We have an article also over the summer that we're talking about thermal events. And granted, you get thermal events in all vehicles, in all school buses, right?
Yes.
It's unknown, though. And what we're seeing in the news where these Teslas or whatever, I don't want to just throw Tesla under the bus, but these vehicle fires, we're seeing a lot of transit bus fires. Thankfully, we haven't seen school bus yet, but we just know that these fires behave absolutely opposite than what we're used to, right? You can't just put water on them and put them out. These things will continue to burn, and there's these battery issues. Any thoughts on that?
Well, one of the first things we did was bring in our EMS people and our fire department to show them the vehicle, and show them where the switches were to turn the vehicles off if we have some kind of electrical fire or the vehicle's in an accident. We want to make sure everybody in our district was prepared for that. There have been many school buses that have burned with diesel engines. There are many automobiles out there that have burned to the ground, with gas engines in them. And then all of a sudden we have one Tesla, for example, burn up, and it's a big news, But if you look at the numbers, I don't know, maybe we had one Tesla fire that day and probably had 1,500 of the fossil fuel vehicles burn up the same day. But we don't talk about that anymore because that's almost like common, But I know I've attended lots of webinars. I've participated in a lot, and I was fortunate enough one time to ask a question nationwide. And the question I asked was, what about battery safety? Well, the manufacturers all answered in a different way. One manufacturer answered, well, we build our batteries to withstand a manhole explosion in New York City. And another manufacturer answered, we build our batteries to withstand a gunshot in Los Angeles. So the manufacturers are really looking at battery safety.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A lot will be proven out of that. Just like any new technology, of course, people always have a lot of questions, and people at the forefront like yourself, Doug, and Gaylord Community Schools, that's really, kicking the tires on these buses to figure out, what is needed and how they perform. So I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your perspectives on technician shortage and electric buses. Really appreciate it and look forward to, continue to work with you. I know you're still in the industry. You retired, but you're still working with MAPT, and, would love to get you to STN Expo Indy perhaps next summer. So we'll talk.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Doug. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
A special thanks to Doug and Ryan for jumping on. Great conversation today. Also, special thanks to our episode sponsor, TransFinder. We appreciate you. Couldn't do it without you. Reminder, guys, TSD Conference, Transporting Students with Disabilities Special Needs, November 8th through the 13th. Lock in that early bird rate, $100. Our agenda is up on the website. Ryan and the tenured faculty have been working hard to get you great content. So go check out everything that they're creating for you, our great agenda, everything that you need. Nation, stnonline.com for all the latest and greatest school transportation industry news. The new August issue, make sure and check that out. We're working on September, so that's not far away. So keep your eyes out on that coming up soon. Make sure and share the podcast. Get it out to the community. Send it out LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to pods. Nation, we love you. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week.